Hi everybody, Chris here, and a big welcome to Excel VBA for beginners. Now, Excel VBA, there's no doubt it's a technical thing, and over the course of the next 4 or 5 hours, we're going to learn awesome technical skills. There's no doubt about that. But Excel VBA, I've got to say, probably changed my career. It's such a powerful thing. It allowed me to have impact, to have a YouTube channel, to have a small company. So we're not just coming at this from a technical perspective. Excel VBA for me is career changing, and it's my aim over the next few hours to help you realize the potential of Excel VBA and really think how it could help you in your career. So with that said, let's get into the first slide. Reasons to learn Excel VBA. I invite you to grab a pen and a piece of paper and write this down. It's going to help motivate you through this series. So reasons to learn Excel VBA. What's yours? The first thing is it saves people and organizations time and money. Yes, for the past 15 years, I've been working for a small company, Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions, and the primary focus of our activity is helping people and organizations save money with Excel VBA. So what scale are we talking about here? Are we talking about saving a few minutes? Are we talking about saving a few dollars here and there? Well, let me tell you a quick story, which is we have a customer over in Florida. They spent around $50,000 with us over a couple of years, and we developed a VBA application. We're going to learn how to do that over the next few hours. They then took the application, took it to a software company and said, could you recreate this as a piece of software? And they were quoted by the software company. So initial cost, $50,000. Can you guess how much the software company quoted them? They quoted them $1 million. So it just gives us a sense about the power of VBA and all of the techniques, the constructs in that VBA application we're pretty much going to cover in this series. So it saves people and organizations time and money, could save your organization time and money. That could have an epic impact in your career. Reason 2, it's a great way to start computer coding. Yes, there's so many programming languages out there, so much good stuff. There's AI options these days. So why should you spend your time with Excel VBA? Well, simply put, it's a great way to learn all of the others. Within a few minutes, we're going to open up Excel in this demonstration. We're going to open up the VBA Editor, and you're going to start seeing what computer code looks like. And I say computer code, not VBA specifically, for a reason. That's because all of the concepts in computer coding, things like conditional statements, things like loops, things like variables that we're going to cover, all of those concepts are common to all computer programming languages. So whatever you might end up working with, VBA is going to be a great start for you. But there's more than that. There's something specific about Excel VBA, which it works out of Office and specifically out of the spreadsheet, out of Excel. Why does that help us? It helps us visualize. It helps us see what the code is doing. As we're going to do many times in this series, we're going to see the coding window on one side, Excel on the other side, so we can understand what the computer code is doing. A lot of computer programming languages, they're a bit abstract, so we can see very, very clearly what the code is doing. That's a great learning benefit. That's why Excel VBA is a great way to start computer coding. And thirdly, it builds your Excel skills. Yes, we've already mentioned we're working in Office, and specifically in Excel VBA interacts with the other Office programs as well, things like PowerPoint and Word. But we're specifically in Excel, and Excel I call one of the languages of organizational life. Yes, it's one of the common currencies, isn't it, of organizational life. How many Excel files get attached to emails every day? How many get shared via SharePoint every day? You really have to be good at Excel to be able to accelerate your career if there's any kind of analytical aspect to your job. This is why I love Excel VBA. We're going to be building the very practical skills in Excel, and finally, it could transform your career. Yes, I had something of a career crisis. Around 15 years ago, I was actually working out in Japan. I was working for a PR company and I was made redundant. This was around the time of the financial crisis. Wasn't quite sure what to do with my career. I elected to do a master's in business analytics, University of Warwick here in the UK, where I've subsequently taught for several years. And yes, it was transformational. It was a bit of a master's in spreadsheets, but it definitely transformed things for me. Once I told people I could do spreadsheets, that led very organically to projects. That led to the YouTube channel, me doing things like this, and that led to my company. So it's no exaggeration to say it could transform your career. So with that said, a little bit more about me. I'm the founder of Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions, a company here in the UK. We also have the Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions YouTube channel. You can find on YouTube, approaching 100,000 subscribers there. So real world consulting. Yes, this is the main thing I do. I love creating content like this on YouTube, but most of the time I'm working with real world customers, small and large, across the world, with the aim of saving them time and money, doing what we call data automation. So automating processes where they're moving data around, those really annoying day-to-day things you have to do every day. You think there must be a better way. Yes, that's the kind of thing we do. YouTube approaching 10 million views, 100,000 subscribers. As I've already mentioned, I undertook my master's at Warwick Business School here in the UK. I was subsequently asked to teach at Warwick Business School. I've taught tens of thousands of students on various business topics, including Excel VBA at BSc, MSc and MBA level. What should you ask me about? Well, you can ask me about Luna the dog. She's a bit of a star on our YouTube channel. Drumming, High Rocks, Nottingham Forest FC, and the Japan days that I've already mentioned briefly. But drumming, let me just say something about drumming. What skill do you learn, right? You must have some kind of hobby. Maybe it is going to the gym. Maybe it's drumming. Maybe it's even gaming. Excel is a skill. Excel VBA specifically is a skill. So you're going to have to call on that ability to learn a skill. Yes, you've learned something. I know you can ride a bike. So all of those things you had to bring to the table when learning those skills. For me, it was drumming. You're going to have to call on those when we're learning Excel VBA. We're going to talk more about that in the course of the next hour. So the structure for this series is as follows. This video is our Excel VBA quick start. So hopefully we've established some motivation for learning Excel VBA. It's a quick start. Yes, we're jumping in at the deep end. Next, I'm going to demonstrate some Excel VBA to you. And before the end of this video, you will have written your first macro. You'll be getting involved with some pretty powerful Excel VBA code. That's coming up very shortly. The second video, we're going to be working with ranges and variables. You know, what's a variable? We're going to dig into that. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and it's an essential of Excel VBA and programming more generally. I love loops. Loops are the key to quick automation because a loop allows us to repeat an action any number of times in VBA and computer programming more generally. And then position control and offset, something that's kind of idiosyncratic to Excel VBA, because position control is where are we in the spreadsheet? Yes, this is a benefit of Excel VBA. We have an almost physical thing, although there is a spreadsheet physical. Let's not get into that conversation now. But we have a thing that we're working with, a grid. So your ability to control which cell we're working on that grid, that is an absolute key component of the impact your VBA skills will have. And finally, video 5, we're going to be talking about conditional statements. We want to send the code in one of two or more directions according to what's happening in the spreadsheet. Conditional statements we will be covering in video 5. So I hope that's some motivation for you. I hope you feel we've plotted a bit of a course through this very complex but incredibly exciting topic. I'll see you in the next section for a practical demonstration. So personally, when I'm learning something new, I like to bear the how, what, why concept in mind. So let's apply this to Excel VBA, starting with the why. Well, hopefully we've covered a bit of the why Excel VBA is important. So let's deal with the how and the what. So the what is Excel VBA? A quick definition: Excel VBA stands for Visual Basic for Applications. It's the programming language that sits in the Office suite, so sits in Excel, sits in Word, sits in PowerPoint, and in other programs, apps in the Office suite, and allows you to automate actions and automate processes. This is the most clear and concise definition I can give you of VBA. So just quickly, what would automating an action be? Well, you might want to change the value in a cell. You might want to reformat a cell. You might want to sort some data. So all of those single actions can be automated, but it really gets exciting when you start building chains of commands, when you start connecting those actions together step by step to do something altogether more exciting. And we're going to jump in with a demonstration in just a second. But before we do, 3 things I want you to bear in mind, because we're going to jump in at the deep end, and I want to give you reason not to feel discouraged. I talk about the 3 Excel meta skills. So let me say, we have a small company and we have to, hire people to fulfill on projects and stuff. What kind of person is the best programmer? So if you would give me one programmer and you would say, yeah, this person has solid technical skills, but we're not sure about this person's attitude, they're largely untested. And then you were to give me candidate B, and this person didn't have very strong technical skills, maybe had limited experience in VBA, but really understood the meta skills and could demonstrate experience applying the meta skills. I would definitely go for candidate B. That's because the meta skills are so important, and that's why we mentioned them in the previous section. You've already learned stuff in your life. When you were learning the other stuff, whatever we're talking about, you were applying these meta skills. So the first skill is, just quickly, conceptualization. I also say translation sometimes, but this is, can you look at what you're trying to do in Excel, whatever process you're trying to automate, and can you translate that into the VBA you need? So we're going to build a toolkit of VBA tools and techniques, but they don't mean anything if you can't pair them with situations where you would apply each one. I call this process translation. In a previous job, I was a translator from Japanese to English. Can you believe that? But this is entirely a conceptual thing. So one of the most important skills when we're talking about Excel VBA isn't technical at all. Conceptualization and translation. Second skill, experimentation. Can you play? Can you use trial and error? I implore you to download the download files that we provide with these resources and play. So if I change that line of code, what happens? If I change this line of code, what happens? Okay. Then what happens if I do this? If you can get yourself in that nice reinforcing loop where you try something and it works and you get that little positivity hit, that is where you're going to make big gains with Excel VBA. That is all about experimentation. And finally, debugging. Yes, things are going to go wrong. Things go wrong every day in my real world Excel VBA programming work. So how well can you handle the psychological setback of an error and eventually see it as a chance to learn and improve? That might sound a little bit patronizing. It's not meant to, but if you can eventually learn when we get an error to think, right, I can learn something about this. I can learn about the type of error. I can learn how to avoid it. That is really going to help. So debugging, our third Excel meta skill. I'm going to go ahead, jump into the download file, and this is all it is, guys. Excel VBA. Where does this code live? Well, we're going to make sure we can see the developer tab. We're going to deal with that shortly in this video. If you get the developer tab visible and select it, you can then click Visual Basic here. It's the Alt and F11 shortcut on the Windows PC. And this is where Visual Basic VBA code lives in Excel. It lives in the Visual Basic Editor, which is attached to an Excel file as long as you save to .xlsm. All of these technical points we're going to cover later in the video. So if you're in the Visual Basic Editor, this is what it looks like. We've got our modules listed down here. We'll talk more about the Visual Basic Editor later, but this is a macro. This is a piece of VBA that's going to do something useful. So the purpose at this point isn't to understand it. The purpose is to appreciate the impact. So what do you think this VBA code does? Well, as with all computer programming languages, most as far as I know, it's in English and well-written code. You'll be able to understand what it does just from having a basic understanding of English. Create worksheets is the name of this routine. So yes, what does this routine do? It creates worksheets. So I've clicked in the routine. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and I'd just like you to keep an eye on the spreadsheet and what changes in the spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead, click play, and we just had a little flash there. And what can we see? We've seen worksheets created in the spreadsheet. We have 5 worksheets. Why do we have 5? Why don't we have 50 or 15? Why do we have 5? And then helpfully, the VBA routine has told us when this sheet was created. Interesting. So the only purpose of this is to understand what's going on, and then Excel VBA metaskill incoming to do some experimentation. So what if I say from 2 to 2 here? How many worksheets are going to be created? Make a little hypothesis. Well, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 0. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be super clear, but I can see I've created 2 worksheets here. Okay, what if I set this number to 10? What's going to happen? Are we going to see 10 worksheets? And I can skip through the worksheets in the file, and I can see we've created 10 worksheets there. Could I change the message that's being written here? This says sheet created, and now maybe even without any specialist knowledge of VBA, maybe that controls what's going on in the spreadsheet here where it reads sheet created. Could I just make a minor adjustment here? Could I experiment and appreciate what's going on? So what if we said worksheet there? Is that going to change? That didn't change, did it? Okay. There we go. It changed second time. The second time I ran the routine, it now says worksheet created here. So what do we got? We've got a routine that can create any number of worksheets at the click of a button. How cool is that? How many worksheets have you created in Excel in the course of your career? And how many repetitive tasks are you engaged with that involve the creation of worksheets? As you can see, we can do it at the click of a button with Excel VBA. In the next section, we're going to talk more about real-world projects, but I'm just hoping you can begin to appreciate the possibilities here, just how powerful Excel VBA is, those worksheets created at the click of a button. But it's also about getting into the VBA editor, seeing it's not that scary, and just beginning to apply those meta skills, conceptualization. We've got a loop in that code. So an example of how to apply a loop is to create multiple worksheets. We've got a VBA technique and we've got a concept, being able to apply those together. We've just been doing some experimentation, and we're going to go ahead to complete this. We're going to go ahead and do some debugging. So what if we have a syntax error in our code? We're going to go ahead, click play, and we have a VBA error. We want to get this out of the way early. We're going to see many VBA errors. Have I thrown my computer out the window? No. Many times in my career, I felt like doing that. But yes, that immediate response to the debug error, appreciating it as part of the learning process, as I said, appreciating it as an opportunity to learn, that's going to, if you can do that, that's a meta skill, and that's going to really help you. So quick demonstration. Discussion of the meta skills. Hopefully you're beginning to appreciate the possibilities. In the next section, we're going to talk more about the pros and cons of Excel VBA, some example projects, hopefully get you thinking about how you could use VBA in your career. So hopefully you can feel we're working on 2 tracks here. Firstly, we're getting into VBA, getting into the Visual Basic Editor, more of that coming in the next section. But on the other track, we're looking at what might actually be possible. What might be possible for you next week, next month, next year, 5 years time in terms of what you're doing with Excel VBA. So in this section, we're going to go through some practical stuff, the pros and cons of Excel VBA. I'm going to walk you through 3 example projects to help you appreciate the possibilities, what we can do with Excel VBA. But then finally, you're going to write down your dream Excel VBA project. Yes, it's not just about us learning some code, that's great, but it's about having impact in the real world. So that's what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes or so. But VBA, like any programming language, isn't perfect. There are pros and cons. You know, I think computer programming is a bit like owning a sports car. Now, I certainly don't own a sports car. My car is a 10-year-old Golf. But if you did own a sports car, you could move very fast, but you might occasionally have a little crash. And that's what computer programming languages are like. We can get incredibly powerful impacts in terms of automation, all the good stuff we've been talking about, but there are some risks. So what are the risks specific to Excel VBA? So the pros first, availability and access. Yes, Excel is one of the common currencies, as we know, of organizational life. So it's very likely your colleagues or your customers, if you're consulting with someone, are going to be using Excel. So Excel's available. The people you want to help are likely to be using it, and access, availability and access. VBA is accessible. There's no additional cost beyond what you're paying, whatever your Office subscription is, there's no additional cost. So a pro is definitely, it's available, it's accessible. Secondly, here, it's part of Office, the Microsoft Office suite, and it applies to the apps you're using daily. This is a great thing to remember with Excel VBA. Yes, a lot of people learn VBA in Excel, but you can interact between apps. We've done projects where we create charts in Excel, put them into PowerPoint, creating, a 20-slide PowerPoint presentation instantly with analysis from Excel. So this is a great pro of Excel VBA. It's easy to learn. As we've already mentioned, the VBA Editor can sit alongside the spreadsheet, as we saw in the previous section. That means there's a concreteness to it, if that's the right word. We can actually see what the code is doing, as we're going to see before the end of this video. You can step through the code step by step, an important debugging skill, and see what's happening step by step in the Excel spreadsheet. Incredibly useful for the learner. Finally, unrivaled power. Anything you can conceptualize, you can code with Excel VBA. Yes, an incredibly powerful coding language. It's probably fair to say they wouldn't invent VBA today. VBA is a well-established, bit of a euphemism. It's a bit of an old coding language, 40 years old? Maybe more now. They wouldn't create something so powerful now because of the potential for, how would you say, for people doing bad things to your system. The power is unrivaled. We've seen we can create sheets, but we can do so much more than that. We can create files. We can also delete files. Yes, with a VBA routine, you could delete all the files off somebody's system. So huge power, but moving on to the cons, also needing close control. We're going to see in the next section, when we actually open up Excel and get it set up for VBA, there's a few steps for us to work through to make sure we can get VBA working. Microsoft has introduced those to make VBA better controlled, to make it secure. So when you've got that enable macros notification, that's so the user is sure that they want to allow VBA to work and that they trust whoever has sent them this file. So lots of power, needing control. And just quickly, if you compare to a more modern coding language like OfficeScript now available in Microsoft Office, and it works online, OfficeScript. Just quickly, OfficeScript, what's the scope of OfficeScript? It's only the workbook you're in. So VBA, we can go and find another workbook. We can go and delete another file potentially. With a more modern programming language, OfficeScript, it can't do anything outside of the file it's in. So it just gives you a sense of where VBA lies in terms of, the history, if you like, of computer programming language and what the pros and cons are. Let's move into the cons. So not usually available in the cloud. What does this mean? If you're working on SharePoint, and lots of organizations are these days, VBA isn't immediately available in SharePoint. If you open Excel in the web browser, VBA is not going to be available. To be able to access Excel, you have to open it in the desktop app. So not immediately available in the cloud applications, as I just mentioned. Something like OfficeScript is available in the cloud applications. As I said, control issues, its power can be a double-edged sword. And this is why you'll often find IT departments being a bit suspicious of Excel VBA because of that lack of control. I have fought that battle hundreds of times over the years, explaining the pros of Excel VBA, the unique power we've already discussed, Yes, you will come up, you may well meet some organizational resistance, which is well-meaning, but we can control VBA to ensure everything's going to be okay, and we can still harness its unique power. A traditional coding environment lacking graphical support. We've been in the VBA editor already compared to more modern programming languages and facilities. I'm thinking of things like Power Automate, for example. There's not much in terms of graphical support. Now, I'm very used to working in the Visual Basic Editor. I've got used to Excel's quirks and Excel VBA's quirks over the years. I think overall it's pretty good, the VBA coding environment. It's very flexible, easy to work with, as we're going to see, but it does lack some of the, how would you say, premium features perhaps that you might find in some of the more modern coding environments. Does have a bad reputation in some quarters, Excel VBA, as I mentioned, because of that lack of control. But I would say, as a parting comment, I've been working in the world of VBA for 15 years. I am yet to see VBA being used for this kind of nefarious application. You know, we live in an age where people are trying to do this with computer coding, with all kinds of, how would you say, phishing devices and stuff. I've never seen someone try to use VBA to do that. So as with any reputation, you know, you want to be asking the questions, is this fully deserved? Anyway, you've got the pros and cons there, and it's up to you to decide how it fits into your career. Okay, let's move on to 3 example projects. So for me, it's my mission to get you to appreciate what the potential of Excel VBA is. We've spoken about the power. So give me an example of the power. This is from a real world project that we have been working on the past few years. Each morning, the manager of a commodities trading brokerage wishes to send indicative prices to prospective customers. Excel VBA is used to get live base prices from online data sources, along with live exchange rates. These are inputted to a model in the spreadsheet, which adds haulage price and user configurable margin. The final price is formatted as a quote and emailed to around 200 prospective customers at the click of a button. Yes, this is an Excel VBA application. This is maybe a couple of 100 lines of code. We've seen a VBA routine with 20 lines of code. So it does take a bit more in terms of coding. Interesting features here. We've got Excel VBA sending an email at the end. Yes, that's something we can do. We can tap into Outlook and send an email. This is an interesting project because it has awesome real world impact. Our customer uses this every morning. 200 prospective customers receive a quotation. Quotations mean a potential conversation about a sale. That's what I am all about as a consultant, real world impact of Excel VBA. Example project 2, a manager based in the US wishes to create a RAMS, risk assessment method statement, for a new project. Excel VBA is used to select the methods for the project, which are kept up to date in a spreadsheet along with associated risks. Risk level is calculated via a simple numerical model in the spreadsheet. The methods, risks, and risks levels are listed, formatted, and output to a PDF at the click of a button. Yes, all this magic is happening at the click of a button. This is an interesting project because we've got 2 or 3 what we'd call data sets sitting in Excel with these risks listed and with these methods listed. And the user is able to select the kind of project that they want to create their RAMs for, click a button, then in the background, Excel is going to go into these different data sets, assemble the data, lay it all out and put it into a PDF. It takes just a few seconds. If you've ever had to do a RAMs risk assessment, these things can take time, can be somewhat onerous. Imagine being able to do that at the click of a button, maybe not at the end of this video or even at the end of this month. Perhaps at the end of this year, your VBA skills could be good enough to do this. Finally, example project 3. A sports trader trading football matches wishes to backtest systems based on football data. The data comprises the odds available 3 and 5 minutes before the kickoff time across various markets, such as home win, a number of goals scored. Each Excel VBA tests thousands of theoretical trading strategies based on different combinations of odds, brackets, and markets. The output, candidate bets with analysis of theoretical performance over time, is viewable at the click of a button. Yes, we can say it all together now, can't we? This all happens at the click of a button. I like this application because VBA, it's not just all about work. Yeah, and I'm a big sports fan. Football here in the UK is incredibly popular, and I love this project. We've been working with this customer for nearly 10 years now. And I love this project because it's about something that I enjoy, something that I'm interested in, something that I can understand easily, this football data. So your Excel VBA dream project doesn't have to be about work. It could be related to your hobby if data plays a part in your hobby. Having said that, this is very much a professional football trader that we're working for here. So I invite you to write it down. I'm never too far from my pen and paper. I always like our clients to see me writing stuff down on pen and paper. I think that's an exciting, a powerful thing. But what would your dream project be? You've learned a bit about the pros and cons of Excel VBA, the power and the need to control it. You've seen my example projects, real world projects, all of these projects we're working on still. Your dream project: process is automated, errors reduced, time and money saved. What could it be? Write it down. I'll see you in the next section where we're going to be jumping into Excel VBA. This section is Excel VBA Quick Start. So as the name suggests, we are getting started with Excel VBA. First, what are the practical things we have to consider when getting set up for Excel VBA? So have you ever received a file containing VBA via email, and have you noticed it can be a bit frustrating to get everything going? So firstly, let's work through that and let's make sure our system, your system, is set up for Excel VBA. So I'm in the Windows File Explorer here, and I have downloaded a file from an email that I know contains Excel VBA. How might you be able to guess? You can guess from the file type, Excel macro enabled worksheet. That file might well contain Excel VBA. We'll talk more about the importance of the file type in just a second. So what happens when I open this file? I get this security notice telling me really to disable macros. So I have to go into Excel and I can disable macros here. So if I go into the developer tab and Visual Basic, I can see the code here, but I'm not going to be able to run the code because macros for this project are disabled. So how can we fix this so we can actually run Excel VBA? To do that, you've got to go back to the file location. So it would be sensible at this point, of course, to take it out of your downloads folder and to save it somewhere on your system. You have to right click on the file, show more options. On my system, we want to get to properties. You can see right at the bottom here. And then the key really is in the general tab, unblock. You hit unblock at the bottom. You can hit apply and OK. Now, when we open the file, what we should find is we have the option to enable macros. We can see the file is open now. I can view the developer tab, go to Visual Basic. I can now hit F5 on the Windows PC. You can also hit play, and you might have noticed that flashing. So this macro is now working. So that's how to get macros working. It's something to bear in mind if you're working with a customer, someone within your organization, someone external. If you're working as a consultant, you've got to provide this guidance because people can become discouraged quickly if they can't get your VBA application working quickly. With that said, what else do we have to bear in mind to get set up for Excel VBA? Well, being able to view the developer tab is really helpful, and the file save format is something else to bear in mind. So if we go to options here, I'm going to go to customize ribbon and just make sure you have the developer box ticked here. Now the default setup here is usually you can view developer, but you can't actually see it. It's not ticked rather. So you can just go ahead, tick it. You might have to reopen Excel, but you should then be able to see the developer tab. The developer tab is right here. That means we can access Visual Basic. We can record a macro, as we're going to see in a second, and we can insert a button here. All of these things we're going to do many times during this series. Also bear in mind the keyboard shortcut. So view the VBA Editor, Alt F11 on the Windows PC allows me to bring the VBA Editor straight into shot there. And while we're here, how do we get this nice setup? where we're able to view both screens, or both windows rather, side by side using the Windows key. On the Windows PC, if I hold down the Windows key and then hit the arrow keys left, right, up and down, it does different things with this window. This is, of course, the layout that we're looking for. And you can see I've got multiple screens available. It is useful, if possible, for you to have multiple screens available. That means you can put the VBA editor on one screen, Excel on another screen. That's going to improve your efficiency. Having said that, I've got a 13-inch laptop down here. That's my travel laptop. I've done a lot of my VBA coding on a 13-inch screen. So being able to view these windows side by side, if you can do that, that's going to help regardless of your screen size. Other things to bear in mind in options, the default file save format. So what does this mean? Well, let's go back to our download file. If I were to try to save this as an Excel workbook, you can see we've got different options here. We've got macro enabled workbook. That's what we're interested in, of course. If we're using VBA, we want the workbook to be enabled for macros, a macro being a chunk of VBA code that does something useful. If we try to save it as Excel workbook, what's going to happen? We're going to get this notification, which is if you try to save a workbook containing VBA, this workbook does contain VBA as a normal Excel workbook, you're going to lose the VBA. Yes, and this has happened to me. I have lost big chunks of VBA in the past this way. So we can say go back. Now, what I'd recommend you do, certainly while you're learning, while you get used to this, is of course good version control, backing up files as you go. I'm constantly hitting the F12 key on the Windows PC when I'm doing development to allow me to save files as I go. And then this option is worth bearing in mind. So save, and then your default file save format. You can see I have this save set to Excel workbook. You can set this to Excel macro enabled workbook. And that means by default, when I go ahead and hit the F12 key, I can see Excel macro enabled workbook is the default option here. So just some practical things there to help you get started, to help you get your system set up for Excel VBA. So we've spoken a bit about the VBA editor. We have seen the VBA editor in action, but what are the main areas of interest here? Well, I'll recommend you go ahead, do a little bit of sizing here, and just note three main areas. That's all we need to know to begin with. Firstly, we have the Project Explorer at the top. All of the objects that are active, if you like, at the moment. We're going to talk about more about what an object is later. You can see here. So in English, Chris, speak English. These are all of the files that are open. I can see I've got a file open called Series Outline, and this is the file that we just opened. So things to bear in mind here. Make sure you're working in the right file. Yes, I can see I've got a module here. I want to be very aware what file this module is in, and I can see it's in my video 1 demo file. I want to make sure I don't accidentally use this. So I'd actually recommend, if you're only working with one file, and most of the time you are with Excel VBA, go ahead and close other files. That means the Project Explorer window is going to be uncluttered, and you're less likely to make the error of, accidentally deleting a file. Right, deleting VBA rather. And then what else can we see in the Project Explorer? We can see the sheets in the file, and we can see the workbook too. The workbook itself being treated as an object. Not hugely important at the moment. If you get into advanced VBA, there's routines that live in these objects in this area and this area here. That's why we can see them here. So this is the Project Explorer. And as usual, you can expand and collapse these according to whether you want to see them or not. Code lives in modules. It's best placed in modules anyway. And you can see we've created a module and our code is here. We can rename these modules as we're going to see later. Okay, so the top left is the Project Explorer. Now the bottom left is the properties window. So what's a property? A property is something about the object that we might want to change. We might want to manipulate. And have you ever wondered how you get a spreadsheet to be very hidden in a file? Very hidden. Very hidden means even in the Excel file, if you right click on the sheet tabs, you can't see the sheet to be able to unhide it, potentially. So it's down here. You can click on the worksheet, access it through the VBA Editor in the Project Explorer. You can see them here. You can set the sheet to very hidden. I have to do that again. Okay, it doesn't want to do that. Is that because it's the only sheet in the file? Okay, so sheet 1 is very hidden. So I can go back to the worksheet here, and if I right click, I don't have the option to unhide anything because it's very hidden, and very hidden means you don't have the option to unhide it in the spreadsheet. So that could be interesting if you really needed to hide a worksheet, didn't want people to be able to easily unhide it. So this is the properties window. There's other properties we're going to work with as we go through this series. And then this really is where the main action happens. This is the coding window. We're going to talk about the option explicit ritual later. This is where the code lives. And, for the avoidance of doubt, this is a macro. This is the macro. So sub means the macro starts here. This is the name of the macro. We always try to give macros and variables informative names that describe what they actually do, as opposed to macro 1 or variable 1. And then this here is the command that's the end of this macro. So we've got the start of the macro here, the end of the macro here. Now we could have any number of macros in a module. I can go ahead and create another macro here, and we'd see macros stacking up in a module. The idea would be to organize related macros in the same module. Yes, we can go ahead, insert module. We can see we've now got 2 modules here. So macros doing a similar job. We could have macros that are referring to each other, whatever it might be. We have options using multiple modules to group those macros together. Right, so that's our introduction to the VBA Editor. We've covered some practical considerations to get your system started. For Excel VBA, next, we're going to explore the macro recorder. So we've looked at the macro recorder. This section is about writing organic code. Yes, we're becoming computer programmers. We're going to actually write some code from scratch. We're going to open the VBA Editor, practice that alignment. With Excel, we're going to create and name a module. We're going to go through option explicit, creating a macro. What we're going to look to do is display a message box all in the next 5 minutes or so. With that said, I'm going to get back into our download file. Now, it would be possible to put a macro here. We've already mentioned we can stack multiple macros up in the same file. But for this demonstration, we want to create and indeed name a new module. So I'm going to go to insert at the top and module. You can see how I've organized the Project Explorer. The only file that has its contents viewable is this macro recorder demo file that I'm using for this demonstration. You could even go ahead and close any other files. That's probably the best thing to do. So name the module. We're going to say organic code demo. You can call it whatever you want, but an informative name is always the best way. The name of the module should describe the function of the macros within the module. Then we have option explicit. Now we're not going to talk at the moment about exactly what option explicit means, but briefly it means we're going to get into fewer problems with spellings of variable names. Yes, we're going to come back to option explicit later, but it's our ritual when we start a new module. We always put option explicit at the top. We're going to go ahead and create a new macro. We're going to say display message box here, because that's exactly what our macro is going to do. And once again, just like the name of the module and indeed of variables coming later, the name of the macro should be informative. It's really simple what we're going to go ahead and do. This perhaps is your first line of organically coded syntax. We can just go ahead and type MSG box, and then with the speech marks, you can put some text in there. Whatever you want to display in your message box, that's what we're going to put in. And this is probably your first bit of organically coded VBA, and this is a macro. We know the features of a macro: sub, macro name, and then end sub, and then the commands that we want to follow in the middle here. So I'm going to click in the routine. I can see the cursor flashing in the routine. We're going to go ahead and click play, and we can see our message box flashing up there. Do we stop there? No, we don't. You should go ahead, do some experimentation here. Maybe not particularly exciting for this message box, but it's all going to help. It's all going to help building that skill, building that confidence. And yes, this is the message box, and this is our first piece of organic code. Next, we're going to try something a little more ambitious. So you've now created a VBA macro organically in the VBA editor. Can we do a bit more before the end of this video? Yes, in part 2 of the practical demonstration, we're going to write a value to the spreadsheet. At the moment, we're just displaying a message box. We're not doing anything to the spreadsheet. Can we do something to the spreadsheet? Could we use offset to control position to move to a different cell in the spreadsheet? Could we even create a loop to make something happen multiple times? And then after that, can we play an experiment, refine? Can we get that punch the air moment? Yes, we've got to get addicted to those punch the air moments if you can. There's no limit to where you can go as a VBA programmer. So I'm continuing with the file we were using in the previous demonstration. What we want to do is list 10 numbers. So that's our concept. What tools in our VBA toolbox? Okay, it's looking bare at the moment, isn't it? The VBA toolbox. So I'm going to help us a bit. But what tools might help us to make a list of 10 numbers? Okay, and I've gone ahead and got us started here. And we are in at the deep end. We're not expecting you to understand all of this. We're just getting acquainted with these concepts and beginning to build an understanding. So what on earth does this syntax mean? And this particular syntax, I remember when I first learned it, just thinking, what on earth does that mean? Well, through this video, we've mentioned variables a few times. Variable, it isn't a particularly informative name for what it is. A variable is just a place to store some information that's useful in your macro. And it follows this specific formulation. We're going to talk about it later in this series when we cover variables in more detail. Dim variable name as variable type. Now our variable type is an integer. We're dealing with a list of numbers. So a whole number is our variable type. There's various other variable types, including decimals, including true or false variables, including text variables, a string variable. We want an integer on this occasion, and then this black text, this is the name of the variable. And what good programming habits are we trying to build here? Informative names. Informative name for the macro previously, for our module, and an informative name for the variable. Yes, I don't recommend saying dim a as integer or dim I as integer. You see lots of people doing that. Personally, I don't recommend it. Take the time to write it out, make it informative. That's going to save time and stress in the long run. I absolutely guarantee it. So we've got a new macro. We've declared a variable. What's the use of that variable? Well, this is another step up in difficulty. Once again, don't worry if this isn't making any sense. We just want to become acquainted with the concepts. For counter equals 1 to 10 and then next counter. Yes, for next. These are the building blocks of a loop. The most powerful concept in VBA and computer programming, generally a loop. With a loop, we can repeat an action any number of times. Repeat an action any number of times. That sounds useful to us, doesn't it? Because if we could repeat an action 10 times, maybe we could list 10 numbers. So whatever command we put inside the loop here is going to be repeated 10 times. You could repeat it 100 times or even 1,000 times. Let's stick with 10 in your experimentation phase. You can absolutely go ahead and do that. So we want to write a value to the spreadsheet. What's our building block here? A equals B. It's our A equals B concept. The value of A is going to take on the value of B. So where are we going to start in the spreadsheet? We're in D4. So I'm going to say range D4, and you can see the cell references always live in speech marks. You can see the speech marks there. I'm going to say dot value. So the value property is a property we want to deal with. And then I'm going to say 1 here. Okay, so what we expect to happen? Firstly, what if we had made a syntax error? What would happen? I'm going to click in the routine, and you can see already Excel's not going to run that macro. It's picked up on the mistake there. Very normal when writing VBA code. How many routines have I written? Tens of thousands. This happens to me all the time, so don't worry too much about it. Try to push on. You can always reset the VBA editor using the stop button here. So I'm going to go ahead and play this routine. What are we expecting to happen? I'm expecting a 1 to appear in cell D4. And that happens. We can go ahead, prove it. Now we would expect a 2 to appear there. But that's only telling half the story. Why is that? Because we're actually stepping through this command 10 times. So how could we prove that? What could we use from what we already have in the routine that would make this more exciting and would move us towards listing 10 numbers? Well, we can use the name of the variable here because the variable is always carrying a number between 1 and 10. That's the power of the integer variable combined with the for next loop. So what's going to happen now? You might want to stop the video. If we play this routine, what number is going to appear in D4? And if you get this, you're really understanding. If you don't get it, hey, you've got lots more fun to come. Don't worry about that. I'm going to hit the play button and we can see 10 appearing in this cell. Once again, it's not the full story. It's not the full story because we're not just writing 10 in here. Something else is happening. Let's get into our debugging tools. Debugging, one of our Excel meta skills. I'm going to go to debug and step into the most powerful learning tool in the VBA editor, being able to step through the code. Now you can go to debug and keep pressing step into. And what we're going to notice is Excel working through these lines of code. Hit the F8 key to do the same thing. I'm just going to hit the F8 key. And I can see, just looking in the VBA editor, I can see working through this loop. So we're not telling the whole story by just seeing 10 going into the cell because something else is happening. It's just happening so quickly, we're not able to see it. So let's keep an eye on the spreadsheet now. We can see hitting the F8 key again, stepping through this routine. We can see that value changing in the spreadsheet. So what's happening? Well, this variable counter, I can go ahead and hover the cursor over the variable in the VBA editor. The value of that variable is increasing by 1 each time we go through the loop. And we're then transferring that value from the variable via the A equals B concept, range D4 equals counter. We're transferring that value into the spreadsheet. How cool is that? So we're not just putting a single value into the spreadsheet, we're actually looping through 10 values. We're getting closer, aren't we, to listing 10 numbers. So what's the missing piece of the puzzle here? And obviously, you're not really going to know if you haven't done some VBA in the past. You've watched some of our videos, my videos before. Yes, we're talking about position control. Position control. If we could just nudge the active cell down 1 row each time, we could achieve our goal, which is to list 10 numbers. So how to do that? Well, we're going to use offset, which is our command when we're trying to control position. Okay, so you can see I've just inserted the offset method and I've said offset 10 here. So with offset, the first number is the number of rows to move down. A positive number moves down, which can be counterintuitive, but we've got to remember the row numbers, of course, increase as we go down the spreadsheet. And then 0, and 0 is the number of columns to move across. A positive number moves across to the right here. So stop the video. Where is the number going to appear? Is it going to appear in D4 or somewhere else? Well, I've clicked in the routine. Let's go ahead, hit play, and I can see 10 appearing just below D4 and D5. That's because we've moved away by 1 cell. What if we move away 3 rows down and then 1 column across? So experimentation. Where is this going to appear? I'm going to guess myself, starting in D4, 1, 2, 3 rows down, 1 column across. I'm guessing the value is going to appear in this cell and that's where the value has appeared. So we're just getting to know offset, just practicing the skill of position control. You should go ahead, do more experimentation. But what's the missing piece in the puzzle that's going to make all the magic happen here? What if we reset our offset values? What could I put in here? Substitute for this 0 value that isn't a number, that isn't what we call a hard-coded value. Well, here we can harness the power of Excel VBA, a loop combining with a variable here to make the magic happen. Let's step through this and let's just appreciate this together. A bit of a punch the air moment. I'm going to hit the F8 key, hitting the F8 key, stepping through the code. You can just keep clicking step into, that works fine too. Now hit the F8 key, and what's happening? We're seeing our numbers listed. So when the line of code is highlighted, it's not yet been executed. So this line of code is highlighted. Can I just assess what's going on here? So we're starting at D4. We know that, and then we're offsetting away. We're moving away by the value of counter, which is 5. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows down. And then what value is going to go into this cell? Well, it's the value of counter again. So 5 is going to go into this cell, and I'm just hitting the F8 key and just appreciating the magic of Excel VBA. So you've got to go ahead, do your experimentation. Just off the top of my head, could you create a list of 100 numbers? Could you create a list that went laterally, left to right, rather than up to down? Could you even create a square of numbers? Could you create a list of numbers that started at 10 and counted down to 1? They're just some ideas, some play off the top of my head. It's your job now to experiment, have some of those punch the air moments. As I said, foster a positive addiction to Excel VBA. If you can do that, the sky is the limit, not just for little puzzles like this, but for real world application of Excel VBA. I'm Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure delivering this introductory session about Excel VBA to you. I will see you in the next video.